In my last garden, I had 16 years invested in working with soil and working with a particular space. And when I came here, I knew I wouldn't garden in Austin again unless I could start with a clean slate.
After years of hard work, Tom and Victor Martinez turned the blank slate they selected into a garden. Through his blog, soulofthegarden.com, Tom documents the journey they've shared.
We started off with this big, bare space, and I knew that I really wanted to break it down to a whole series of more intimate rooms, and that's what our trees and shrubs do, especially the boxwood. They create a series of rooms here in the garden that are designed for either small groups of people or even just an individual to be in a place where they really feel kind of alone and to themselves. So even though it's a big garden, there are lots of small spaces in it. I grew up on a hillside in the Hudson River Valley of New York, and we had these beautiful long views from our front yard. We could look out across the Hudson River with the woods and mountains and the view. So some of the long views that we have here were influenced by how much I love just kind of looking out during the day and, you know, kind of scanning over things. That's something that I inherited, I think, from where I grew up. The opposite of that were kind of some of my favorite places were like little hiding places in the woods, where you're completely screened from view and you're kind of cozied in somewhere. And so there are a number of those kinds of spaces in the garden.
The first was a cove of Possum Haw hollies that inspired the garden's name, affirmed by his dad's craftsmanship. Austin inspired another significant anchor, an allée of bald cypress trees.
I'll never forget my first weekend here in Austin. I was a student at the University of Texas, and a friend of mine took me out to Hamilton Pool. And I fell in love with Austin that very day. You know, the tall cypress trees lining the streams, the beautiful grotto. The allée is kind of a representation of hill country stream courses, which are all lined with a double line of bald cypress trees. So it's a symbolic reference to the place where I fell in love with Austin.
Influenced by places as well as people, Tom arrived at his structure after scratching out design after design.
I grew to love European gardens with their classicism, but I also love Oriental gardens, and so there's a little touch of each, I think, in our garden here. You'll see some Eastern layering on top of kind of classical Western garden design. A lot of people, when they think of classical gardens in geometry, they think that's serious and formal. But I think there's kind of also a playful edge to it, and I try to incorporate that in this garden. There's kind of a fun metaphor that I used in the garden with the geometry we have here. It's a combination of circles and squares. The circles tend to be the destination places, and the straight lines take you there. So I call this garden about connecting the dots. One of the features that I really like most, we created after coming back from Japan. I call it my Tex Zen garden. It was inspired by classical Japanese rock gardens, which typically have 3 mountain-like spaces in them. I went to the rock yard and was trying to pick out my mountains. I found these long, flat stones that look like mesas, and I thought, that kind of looks like the hill country. So that became my Tex Zen garden.
Japan also inspired a screen to hide the tool shed, a project that he and Victor shared in design and execution. The screen was prompted by their collaboration in recreating the old patio near the house.
When we moved in, we had a real standard kind of American jacuzzi/deck arrangement out here. I like to call it the Charlie's Angels arrangement. And we've turned that into kind of a raised platform where you could see the geometry of the garden.
With designer Robert McKay, they added another dimension to the close-up and wide-shot views.
I wanted to have a little bit of an elevated space because in a geometric garden, you appreciate it more when you're looking down a little bit at it. I really like the element of surprise in the garden. I think that's a fun thing, and most of this garden's very clear. You stand up here on the patio and you look out over the garden and you think you're seeing it all.
But from the long view, Tom cozied in surprises to entice wandering for intimate discoveries.
The surprise that I have in the garden right now is a sculpture that's on loan from an Austin sculptor named Hank Waddell, and it's a really fun piece.
Color arrives in progressive waves throughout the year. Many are sentimental favorites for Tom or Victor. But the connective blue accents were serendipity.
All the blue pots and the use of blue in the garden really happened by accident. It was a happy accident. We went to a discount store one day and came back with some cheap blue pots. We set them down on our crushed granite, and it just looked so terrific. The orange of the granite playing against the blue. We decided then and there that we wanted to use more and more of that color in the garden. In the end, the garden really should bring you a sense of peace. It's a lot of work, and a lot of time you come out here and all you see is the work, all the elm seedlings and the chickweed and the problems. But I try to work in a little bit of time every day to be out here and just have what I call a little Sabbath time. A little time just to be with nature and to be with the space and to be quiet. And most often it's in the morning. I'll come out here with a cup of coffee and I'll go to my little circle of possum haws and sit in there and just spend a little time with the mockingbirds. And that's the real gift of the garden.